Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the Safe House Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the Safe House Initiative and your host for today's podcast. Last year, about this time, Alex Weintraub co-hosted with me the 10 flaws of incident response, and we had a really good time, and it covered a lot of subjects. It was a 12-week series, and this year we're going to do something very similar to that. And to join us as my co-host this year is my fellow co-chair, Tawana Johnson. Tawana, welcome to the Safe House.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so this year, Tawana, you had the idea that maybe we should delve into the aspects of cyber policies, insurance policies, and delve into that just a bit more, because in terms of the adoption rate for small, mid-sized businesses, it's around 4% for standalone cyber policies, which is shockingly low. So
Yeah.
so what do you, maybe it's just that people don't understand what goes on, or is they intimidated? What do you think that is?
Well, I don't know exactly, Jeff, and I hope that we'll be able to figure that out with this series. Our plan is to walk through different aspects of the cyber insurance um, process. Oftentimes I will see clients who do not have a cyber insurance policy. And in those
Yeah.
cases, responding to an incident can be very, very expensive.
So before we get too far into this, you are currently the vice chair for data privacy and cybersecurity at Lewis Brisbois, and are basically you're leading the charge from a breach coach standpoint. So why don't you kind of give the audience a little bit more about your background, how you got started, how you ended up where you are today? So just kind of a little travelogue of Tawana to where she is today.
Sure. So this is actually my second career. I won't bore you with where I started, but I am a recovering litigator at this point. I litigated
Ooh.
for about 15 years before moving into the cyberspace, and that started roughly April of 2020.
Oh, wow.
When
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Great timing. Yeah.
yes, it was, and the cyber claims and ransomware attacks and everything just skyrocketed during that
Mm,
time because everybody was switching gears to working from home,
mm.
and a lot of businesses were not really um, ready to secure those types of remote connections, and that just really opened up a lot of vulnerabilities. So just those types of incidents skyrocketed in 2020, and it's just been going up ever since.
So Tawana, um, with your role as vice chair of data privacy and cybersecurity at Lewis Brisbois, what does that entail?
Mhm. Sure. So, from the very beginning, we are involved in cyber claims. Sometimes we are contacted directly by businesses that are undergoing an attack. Sometimes we are contacted by some of our vendor partners who have clients who are undergoing attack. Most of the time, we are contacted by our insurance carrier clients
Mm,
on behalf of their insureds.
okay.
Um, so we are involved from the very beginning, or at least we should be.
Hmm.
So the role here is, first of all, to ensure that any investigation into any type of cyber incident remains under the attorney-client privilege.
Okay.
As we move through the series, we'll start talking about some of the risks of, potential class action data breach litigation, and it's really important at the outset to have breach counsel involved to ensure that anything that all those communications, anything by the uh, DFIR firm, all of that remains privileged and not subject to discovery later on. So that's the first role. And really, we spend a lot of time with our clients helping them to stay calm.
Mm,
We are involved with businesses, business owners, on the worst day of their business life. I can't tell you how many times I get on a call with a client, and if I could see them, I'm sure they would be just white as a ghost. They're terrified that their business is over, that they're going to just have to close up shop and call it
Yeah.
a day.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time as attorneys actually counseling our clients,
Hmm.
reassuring them that, it's not as bad as it seems. And, we're here to help. We're here to help our clients get through this incident and come out on the other side. We advise our clients throughout the process. If we need to have threat actor communications or ransom negotiations, we're advising on that. And ultimately, at the end of the investigation, our role is to help our client work through any files or data that may have been accessed or acquired by an unauthorized third party or the bad guys, to help them determine if there are any legal notification or regulatory reporting obligations that may have been triggered by this incident.
So what I heard was you actually buy some calm to steady the minds of your clients so they can have better decision making process effectively.
That's the goal. Yes.
Yeah.
Try to help keep things calm for the client, for
Yeah.
sure.
And so if so you get the call from the insurance company, there's a situation. Now, what if somebody doesn't have an insurance policy? How does that, how do you get engaged there?
Well, again, sometimes we're contacted directly
Hmm.
by clients. Sometimes those calls come in from vendor partners who, a lot of times when a business is undergoing a ransomware attack, their first thought is, let me get online and Google and find a business that can help me, right? So we have relationships with a lot of those vendor partners and firms that help with responding and recovering from ransomware attacks or whatever
Yeah.
other type of attacks. We also have relationships with other law firms that maybe don't have a data privacy and cybersecurity team. And sometimes their clients may be undergoing an attack, and we'll get referrals that way. So
Mm.
it's a variety of ways that they come through. But for our particular practice, our primary source of referrals comes from an insurance carrier.
So by default, as a breach coach, you're acting as what, a quarterback for this interfacing with the insurance company?
That's a really good way to say it, Jeff. So we are kind of coordinating with the client. We're coordinating with the DFIR vendor. We're coordinating with the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier has to approve any expenses. They have to approve the statement of work from the DFIR firm. They have to approve the legal budget. They
Mm.
have to approve
Mm.
any ransom payments. All of that has to go through the insurance carrier. And part of my role is to advocate for my client as to why those fees should be covered,
Got it.
and why the insurance carrier should pay that instead of my client.
Now you are engaged or paid for by an insurance company, but you represent and as counsel for the small mid-sized business or the business itself. Is that correct? The
That's
insured?
correct.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So we call that a tripartite relationship. And I want to make that clear here because a lot of times we'll get on the phone with clients and they don't want to trust me, or they don't want to tell me a whole lot because they're afraid that I represent the insurance company. And that's not the case at all.
Interesting.
We get engagement letters signed by the client, not the insurance company. The insurance company pays my bills. And at the end of the day, the client has indirectly paid my bills through their insurance premiums all along the way. So we do not represent the insurance company. We always represent the client.
So now, when we were talking at one of our co-chair meetings for the Safe House Initiative a few weeks ago, and you said, "Hey, maybe we should talk about how the cyber insurance world actually works, and kind of take a finer point to it, and kind of do what we did last year, have a series for the summer." And we all thought it was a great idea that you had. So why don't you kind of walk us through the thinking of that? How are you breaking it down, and maybe kind of go into each one of those subjects and talk about some of the highlights that you envision, because you'll have guests for each one of those, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Uh,
So, even just over the last 5 years, the cyber insurance market has evolved incredibly. Back even as recently as 2020, an application for cyber insurance was one page front and back.
hmm,
And now we're seeing insurance applications that are much more detailed and involved. There are some insurance carriers that have their own threat intelligence team. And when they receive
hmm.
an application, they will actually go out and see if they can do penetration testing on that particular applicant's network.
Oh,
They're getting much more um, detailed into what the risk is
hmm,
there. So my thought here was, let's start at the very beginning.
hmm,
Let's talk to a risk manager. Let's talk about how you quantify your cyber risk. Where is the data? What kind of data is it? Who has access to the data? How is it accessed? What are the security measures in place in the network? And what is
hmm,
the value to the business
hmm.
if that data is either lost or compromised in some way? So starting there, I think is the baseline for sure.
Okay. And so you figure out what the obligations are, some of the regulations and other obligations that they have.
Sure. And beyond that too, what is the cost to the business if
Mm,
they lose data, right? What is the cost to the business if they can't recover? Or what is the
mm,
cost to the business if they're going to be down for a week and cannot conduct business? They can't sell their products, they can't sell their services, they can't do anything for a week. I've had clients that again are panicking because they have $1 million a day in revenue that they are losing for
yeah.
every day that they're down.
Yeah.
And that's not insignificant. Granted, that's probably a lot compared to other small, medium-sized businesses, but what is that cost? And that's where your risk manager comes in to be able to help calculate
Yeah.
and determine that, and how much insurance do you actually need?
Okay. Then you have to, now you know what you want, so now you need to go out and buy it, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I think we move into talking to a broker.
Okay.
You and I have talked about, we've heard stories of brokers who don't necessarily specialize in cyber insurance saying, "Oh, here's this cyber insurance policy. You probably don't need it, but here it is."
Yeah.
And that's kind of a problem, right? If they're
Mhm.
presenting it that way, then a lot of people are just not going to take it. So we need to talk about what goes into that application process. How do we educate brokers, to sell these policies, to that are going to actually end up being protective for the small and medium sized businesses? What does that whole process look like? And where are we going wrong when brokers are saying, "Oh, you probably don't need this," but how do we fix that
Yeah.
hole there?
Yeah. So should brokers be hand in hand with risk managers, or are some brokers more risk management oriented or consultative in nature, from your
Sure.
experience? Oh, okay.
I absolutely. I think when we talk to our broker partner, we'll go into that. It,
Hmm.
and the broker's role in helping to kind of drill down that cyber risk quantification and determining how much coverage a particular business needs.
All right. So where do we go from there?
Well, the next step after filling out that cyber insurance application is it goes to underwriting. And
Hmm.
so we'll talk to one of our underwriter partners to talk about what kind of risks are taken into consideration with the insurance application. How does a carrier quantify the risk before deciding to write the policy and issue coverage? It may be semi-custom, it may be standard, but I
Hmm.
think where the variable is going to be is in the premium and the cost of the policy based on
Hmm.
what's in that insurance application. And, again, like I said, some insurance carriers have their own threat intelligence team that may
Mm.
actually go out and try to see if they can penetrate that network. And is there something that was on the application that maybe necessarily isn't exactly in place that allows them to access that network? Is there, some discrepancy there?
Mm. Mm.
And how are they going to adjust for that in terms of the policy?
So now we've got our policy under our belt, or underwriters give it to us. We say, okay, that's great. I got a policy. Now what happens?
Sure. So, heaven forbid that there is an incident, but if there is, thankfully, now you have cyber insurance. So,
Mhm.
however you make a claim under that policy, be it contacting your broker, a lot of policies will have, a hotline number or a hotline email that you can report claims to. Sometimes it goes to the insurance carrier, and we even handle some hotlines for some
Mm.
insurance carriers. So the call comes directly to counsel first.
Mm.
So our next vendor partner is going to talk more about technical communications, and that's going to be kind of a liaison with the insurance company, but between claims and the insured client, and kind of talking through some of the details of the policy, talking through some of the details of the whole process. Now, again, we handle that a lot of times, but in other cases, the insurance company handles that, and it varies according to carrier how they want to handle their claims. But I think that's a really helpful kind of independent person for an
Mm.
insurance company to have as well.
But as the breach coach, you'll have some interface with this individual, I would take. And then you either get more engaged or less engaged depending on the configuration.
Right. So then we'll talk about the claims process itself. We'll
Mm.
have a claims examiner come in to talk about, the what happens from the moment they receive notice of a claim to identifying, which vendors are going to be assisting. Insurance companies have panels of different
Mm.
vendors that are approved to help their insureds through incidents.
Got it.
So selecting breach counsel, selecting a DFIR vendor, selecting, in case you need PR or crisis communications, selecting a
Mhm.
vendor for that, selecting a vendor maybe for, threat actor communications and ransom negotiations, selecting a vendor for, facilitating those ransom payments.
Mm.
To talk through that process of identifying the vendors and what it takes to get approvals for each of those vendors and those budgets, how they determine what's covered and what's not, and just generally from beginning to end, what does it look like from the insurance company side when they receive a cyber claim? After that, unfortunately, there's always the risk of class action litigation. So
Mm.
we're going to be talking with, one of our attorney partners who handles defense of class action data breach litigation.
Mm.
Talking about some of the trends. It used to be that it would take 100,000 or more impacted individuals to certify a class for class action litigation. I've seen matters now with numbers as low as 3,000 or less
Mm.
even to certify a class. So I want to talk about some of those trends. Why are we seeing a downward trend in the number of impacted individuals for uh, to certify a class for class action litigation? What are we seeing in terms of forum shopping? What jurisdictions are more favorable to plaintiffs in these data breach class actions? Do we want to be in federal court versus state court? Does that make that much difference?
Oh,
And
wow.
if so, what is the difference?
Hmm.
What kinds of defenses are available to a business who has, tried to do the right thing and ultimately was a victim also, when now they are sometimes they feel like they're being victimized twice, but there's two sides to every coin. So want to talk about some of those risks and aspects of the class action litigation as well.
So those letters we all get in the mail every week for those class actions. So you may have been involved in one of those.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, I generally write those letters myself.
Oh
So,
my God.
so then after that, we'll talk about, coverage litigation. So, we
Hmm.
had a claims examiner on to talk about the claims process and determining what particular fees and vendors and expenses are covered under the policy. Well, sometimes, the insured and the insurance company can disagree on that. So, want to talk to another one of our attorney partners about coverage litigation. What are some of the biggest issues that we see in coverage litigation? What are the things that can, cause an adverse coverage determination? How can a small to medium sized business or any business avoid that kind of adverse determination? And just kind of talk through some of those coverage issues that come up in litigation later on as well. And then the last, part of this series, we're going to talk to another attorney vendor partner about business interruption litigation.
Oh,
We talked before about, what is the cost to a business of if they're down for a day, a week, 2 weeks. A lot of times that can go into litigation. There can be some disagreement about, between the insured and the insurance company about what their actual business interruption loss is. So we'll talk about, some of those areas of contention, and how a business can set itself up in advance to avoid some of those issues in coverage and business interruption litigation later on.
and I love the way you've broken this down because for the unwashed masses, me included, I would never think of half of the ones that you're covering here, but the importance of them, I can see the importance for the long tail effects or the potential exposures this has in the longer term than just in the shorter term.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely more risk than I think businesses can realize, which is why this entire series is so important. And hopefully, it will help increase that uptake of cyber insurance policies,
Yeah.
um, and help businesses stay protected and covered.
Yeah, because I think there's this stigma that if you're a small mid-sized business, it's covered by my property casualty, or it's a luxury I just can't afford, or there's a million reasons, right? It's one of you probably heard a million reasons why.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And don't assume that your property and casualty policy is going to cover it. Sometimes there may be a rider
yeah,
to those policies, but don't make that assumption because that's not necessarily true. And and I think we'll hear more detail on this from our broker partner.
yeah,
It's not terribly expensive to have a separate standalone insurance policy for $1 million or more.
yeah.
It's not a huge expense, but if you ever need it, you'll be thankful that you have it.
A lot of the standalone cyber will have roles like a breach coach and things that you wouldn't normally say, "Oh, that's one of the benefits." Honestly, it'd be a huge benefit to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And you've worked with your guests that you've invited to join. You've worked with just about every one of them, haven't you?
I
At one
have.
time or yeah.
Yeah. And some very closely, some are personal friends as well as colleagues in the industry.
Yeah, and I think, last year's with Alex and his 10 Flaws series, he had worked with those folks also. And just that interaction was so interesting to hear because they've been in the trenches together. So this year promises to be much the same where you've been in the trench and fighting a good battle with the folks that you're talking to on these conversations.
Well, I hope so.
Well, knowing you the way I do, Tawana, I'm pretty sure, yeah, you've not met a stranger in your entire life.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I don't know that that's true, but I'll take it.
Well, Tawana, I'm really excited to collaborate with you on this series this year. It's a fantastic idea, and it's going to be a fascinating series. So, thank you for doing this for us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to working through this with you.
Yeah, me too, Tawana. Well, thank you so much, and have a lovely rest of day.
Thanks. You too, Jeff.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the Safe House Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the Safe House Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen, or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org, or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.